Backup Squad 250, respond 4359, U.S. Route 52, multiple subjects, multiple bee stings. Caller is advising there is 3 subjects, 19-year-old male and female, and a 50-year-old female that has been stung multiple times by bees. They stumbled upon a big bee patch. They do have the road blocked off at this time. They were doing a tree job and came across a beehive gun.
5501 to ladder 55. Expedite your response, please. We got a guy hanging in a tree with a swarm of bees all over him. I'm going to have to get him out of the tree.
One truth first responders know all too well. Expect the unexpected. A call the Ripley Life Squad received on August 26, 2022, dispatched crews to a surreal but exceptionally dangerous scene. 20-year-old Austin Bellamy climbed a tree in his family's yard to trim branches. He did everything he could to stay safe. He wore a harness. He hooked it to the tree so he wouldn't fall. His grandmother and uncle stood on the ground below, keeping an eye on him just to make sure that he was okay. What none of them noticed was a huge bee's nest up in that tree. Bellamy cut through the branch housing that nest, unleashing tens of thousands of angry, aggressive bees. Most attacked Bellamy right away. Others attacked his grandmother and uncle. Bellamy couldn't move. The swarm of bees kept any relatives from climbing up that tree to help him. Ripley Fire Chief Tony Pfeffer led a crew of firefighters and EMTs as they put on their full turnout gear and Nomex hoods, hoping that would protect them from the bees. They doused Bellamy with water, trying to get the bees to disperse. They were able to get Bellamy and cut him down, but the bees kept attacking. Even the sturdy fabric of the turnout gear didn't prevent the chief and others from being stung themselves. The whole time, the severely injured young man couldn't stop thanking firefighters for saving him. While they were rescuing Bellamy, paramedics and EMTs treated his grandmother, uncle, and other bystanders who had been stung repeatedly. The firefighters continued to spray Bellamy with water, trying to keep the bees away. They loaded him into the ambulance, where other paramedics were waiting to provide care for him. Bellamy was still conscious and talking to them, but they noticed that his airway was becoming compromised. The team intubated him and gave him meds for the pain and anaphylaxis. They knew he needed urgent treatment, but it was an hour's drive to the nearest trauma center. They called for University of Cincinnati Air Care. When the medical helicopter arrived in Ripley, flight nurses rushed to the ambulance. They immediately noticed dead bees on the floor and a young man covered in thousands of bee stings. The helicopter was airborne within 10 minutes. The flight crew reported that several bees followed them into the aircraft and then again later into the hospital. Bellamy spent a week in the surgical intensive care unit at the University of Cincinnati. Doctors determined that he had been stung more than 20,000 times. They even found 37 bees in his respiratory system. Doctors say it could take as long as 2 years for all of the toxins to clear from his system. Bellamy credits the Ripley Life Squad and Air Care team for saving his life. He was so grateful for their heroism that saved his life that day that he recently completed firefighter training and is now a volunteer firefighter in his hometown department in Hammersville. Today, we're honored to have a couple of those heroes who saved Austin's life with us. And we're so incredibly thankful for the opportunity to talk to them about their experience on certainly what was a unique and interesting day in their careers. We have with us today Chief Pfeffer from the Ripley Life Squad and EMS Chief Paramedic Craig Hawk. Gentlemen, thank you so much for coming today, spending a little bit of time with us, and telling, again, this incredibly interesting story.
Thank you, sir.
Thank
you
you
for having us out.
Thanks. Well, listen, the first time I heard this story, I was like, it's so incredible and it's so unique that I was like, look, we have got to get these folks on the podcast to tell about that day and share the story really with the rest of Ohio and the rest of the world. So let's walk through it. So you get a 911 call on the day this happened, August 26, 2022, that it's a bee sting or that a person's been stung by a bee? What was the nature of the call?
We received 911 call to respond to the 4000 block of US 52 for multiple people stung by bees, with one subject still trapped in the tree. This was a dual dispatch with the Ripley Fire Department responding, along with EMS staff, Ripley Life Squad bringing 3 ambulances, along with Georgetown Life Squad responding for mutual aid to provide additional assistance to us. Chief Peffer was the first emergency responder on the scene.
I was actually at my house and I responded on my staff truck, and the nature of the what, like Craig said, the nature of the call, there was a person in a tree that was being stung by bees. So I contacted my station and made sure that brought our ladder truck, because the guy was in a tree, to make sure we had ladders and stuff. So then I responded. I was probably two miles, maybe 2.5 miles away. And when I pulled up on the scene, I was first on scene, and it was probably one of the craziest things I've ever seen. There was a guy hanging from the tree, from his harness, lifeless, surrounded by a swarm of bees that looked like a dark cloud covering this guy. I got out of my truck to go assess the situation and see what we were going to have to do, and it wasn't just but a minute or two. I was heading back for the truck. I had on bunker pants, but I got my turnout gear on, my Nomex hood and stuff, because there was bees everywhere. I never saw so many bees in my life, and people were screaming. Austin was occasionally letting out a moan, and it's like, I got on the radio, where are you guys out in the ladder? I said, I need you guys down here right now, and because it was a dire situation. So at that time, everybody started arriving on scene, and we started doing what we had to do to try to save the guy. So
Chief, let me jump in here real quick. So you get the dispatch that somebody's being stung by a bee or been stung by a bee. Surely you don't know the scope of what you're getting ready to walk into as you come to the scene, correct?
No idea. I mean, we pulled up to the scene and saw what we saw, and it was, we never had a run like that before, with that many aggressive bees just stinging everybody. So no, that was the first, and we had no idea what we were going to when we got there.
And when you pulled up, again, was it readily apparent that this is a life-threatening issue? And could you see the scope? You talked about a black cloud. Describe what you're seeing as you rolled up to the scene.
Well, it was, you knew it was a dire emergency, and the guy was, only was going to survive so long being stung by that many bees. And again, it was his lifeless body with thousands and thousands of bees covering him. And, we knew that, something had to be done, and something had to be done quickly to get him out of the tree.
And when you jumped out of your truck and approached that scene, how long did it take before the bees started attacking you, or how long did it take before you knew that you were going to have to protect yourself?
As soon as I got out of my truck.
Oh.
So, but yeah, as soon as I got out of my truck, and started getting stung. So, bees were swarming everywhere. So, like I said, went back and got turnout gear, and then waited on my guys to show up in our truck, and so we could get him down.
So, you get to the scene, it's a dire situation. How do you even begin planning to get this young man out of the tree? I mean, it has to be clearly. I don't imagine they're covering this in your training. So, what do you do with respect to your plan for getting young Austin out of this tree?
Well, we were really, really fortunate that it was on a major Highway 52. It was on a major highway, and it was just right off. The tree was just right off of the road, probably maybe 20 feet or so, 30, whatever it was. And we were fortunate that we could get our aerial ladder to him. Had it not been able to get him off by reaching him with the aerial, we would have had a very, very difficult time getting him down with ground ladders, hooking up a high angle system with, being stung by bees. So we were really fortunate in that aspect of it, that we were able to get him with our ladder. When the ladder stopped, we started positioning the ladder, and we got a hose line off, and hoping that the water would deter the bees a little bit, which it really didn't. But that was our first thing to do while we were getting set up to go try to get him down.
So your truck shows up on scene, and you're able to get hoses out, and again, Austin's suspended up in the tree, and you start putting water on him or in and around the area that he's up in that tree in, and then you're able to get that ladder up there as well?
Yes.
Okay, walk us through the next steps. What do you do from there?
Well, we got the ladder up. Myself and another guy, we went up the ladder, and we were able to get the ladder. He was hanging, just straight up and down, and we were able to get the ladder underneath his feet, and we pulled him onto the end of the ladder. We cut the harness off of him at that point, and he had another safety rope hanging on him. We got it cut off, and we were able to get him onto the fly section of the ladder. And then the guy that was operating the truck, who did a unbelievable job, because he was being attacked by the bees too. He was able to swing the ladder. Well, in our department, our protocol is we don't move a ladder with people on it. That's sort of what we do. But in this situation, we didn't have a lot of choice. So he was able to swing the ladder over to a bank that was actually on the opposite side of the road and lower us down. And that's when we passed him off to the guys, and the guys passed him off to Craig and his crew. So it went as good as probably it could have possibly went.
And even though you're in full turnout gear, when you're up in that tree trying to get him off that harness and get him out of that tree, are you being attacked in your gear by the bees?
Yes. Yeah, they were. It didn't through the coat and pants so much, but the Nomex hood, they were stinging right through it. Yeah.
So you're able to get him out, and you hand him off to the folks who were on the ground. Again, as you got him out of that tree and swung that ladder around, did the bees follow you out of that tree and continue to attack?
Yeah, the bees were there the whole time. They were relentless.
So talk to us about when you got to him up in that tree. What was his medical state? Was he conscious? Was he talking to you? What did he say? Walk us through that.
Well, his first thing that he said that I'll never forget was, he said, "Thanks for coming and getting me." And he was conscious, and we were able to get him out of the tree and onto the ladder, and he was alert. He was in dire straits again, but he was alert, and he was talking to us when we got to him.
Was he able to physically? Was he able to move his body and help you get him on the ladder, or had he been stung so many times that he really didn't have any muscle control or ability to help?
He did not help at all to get him on the ladder. He was pretty much motionless. So
you're suspended in the air in a tree, being attacked by bees, basically having to carry this dead weight to put onto your ladder. Is that what the situation was?
Pretty much, yes.
Oh, that is absolutely amazing. Look, it's amazing that you were able to do that, and nobody gets knocked off the ladder, nobody falls. It was just, it's an incredible story. So you get him down, you hand him off. What do you do from there?
At that point, once we handed him off to the squad, then we had, the Ripley Life Squad, took care of him. So, which they did a fabulous job of getting him to the hospital and stuff. So at that point, basically our job was done. So, and they took over and did what they do.
As you were going through this and you got him out of that tree, did you have any injuries to your folks who were part of the rescue?
Just bee stings.
Okay.
There was the three guys that were, the guy running the truck and myself, and it was actually captain. I wasn't a lieutenant, he was a captain. We were in the back of the squad, and the squad evaluated us and made sure that we were okay and all that kind of thing. It was a very hot day too. So at that point, the life squad kind of took over the scene from there.
Any idea how long it took you from the time that you got on scene until you were able to turn him over to the life squad?
Probably, it seemed like a long time, but probably 20 minutes.
Okay.
I would say 20 minutes, yeah.
And Craig, you're the EMS chief. Do you take over once Austin was handed off?
Excuse me. When the ambulance first arrived on scene, the first arriving ambulance was paramedic Josh Malott and myself. As we were pulling up to the scene, I immediately radioed into the county. Chief Peffer was in the roadway, and he had a large cloud of bees following him around. And I remember radioing to the county that the fire chief's being attacked by multiple bees right now. So we got on scene. We turned off our lights and sirens. Excuse me. We had turned off our lights and sirens about a mile out because flashing lights and sirens, this is actually interesting that I remember this, but from watching Rescue 911 as a child, I remember they had a crash in Georgia involving a bee truck, and the lights and sirens were making the bees worse and agitating them. So I knew at that point, when I saw all those bees and what we were told to tell everybody to turn those lights and sirens off as they were approaching the scene. So we get out, and scene safety is always paramount for EMS. I am highly allergic to bees myself. So as paramedic Malott made way to a patient that was near the house, I was forced to try to go back to the ambulance after I tried to go out and do some work because the bees started on me. And I knew that if they got a hold of me, they would have another patient on scene that was in need in dire straits. So I went back towards the squad and was moving vehicles around at the scene, moving the squad around for the first patient when our second ambulance arrived on scene with paramedic Icorn. Paramedic Icorn, at that point, I was ready to depart the scene with one patient, had requested additional hands for Austin's care because they were getting ready to finish the rescue. So as soon as the Ripley Fire Department staff got him down and got Austin down to the stretcher, we started immediately hitting him with epinephrine based off of his critical condition. We got him onto the ambulance after that. We started working on IV access. Imagine trying to find a vein on someone who has 20,000 stings. That was definitely a challenge. We were able to put an IV in his external jugular vein along with 2 peripheral IVs. We gave him additional medications, Solumedrol, Benadryl, IV, and his swelling and his speech continued to get worse. He started to get additionally hoarse. At that point, Danielle and I both looked at each other and said, we have to secure an airway, and we have to secure an airway right now because this swelling is getting worse. He's starting to become hoarse. He's showing signs of airway obstruction.
So
at that
you actually put an IV. You said you put an IV in his jugular vein. Is that in his neck?
Yeah, in the external jugular vein of the neck. That was the first IV he actually had because at that point we were having a horrible time finding veins because of all the swelling in his extremities from all the bee stings.
So then he starts showing signs that his airway's swelling or his airway's closing up on him, and at that point, that's when you decide to intubate him. Is that correct?
Yes, at that point, and Danielle and I had already talked when they were getting him down that this was probably going to be a situation where we were going to have to proactively take an airway and secure an airway. And at that point, everything started coming together. And so we gave him an additional dose of epinephrine because he was, as I said, he was starting to decline rapidly. We gave him an additional dose of epinephrine. And then as paramedic Icorn was explaining to the patient the procedure, because he was still awake at that time and in his dreams, and paramedic Icorn was explaining the procedure to the patient, I was drawing up the medication, cross-checking it with paramedic Icorn and the crew, and then we proceeded to intubate him. We administered a sedative and a paralytic, etomidate and sucks. And then once the patient was sedated and paralyzed, we utilized our co-pilot video laryngoscope successfully passed a 7.5 ET tube on the first attempt. I have never seen that much swelling in an airway in the posterior oropharynx in my life. You could literally look at the beat with the video laryngoscope in that young gentleman's mouth and throat. You could see bee stings all throughout there. So we got him intubated, got our ET tube secured, got it confirmed with continuous waveform capnography. He had a great waveform, relatively stable vital signs, still giving him fluids, then giving him medications post-intubation for sedation and analgesia, some fentanyl, some Versed, and then we drove him to the landing zone to meet the aircraft that was inbound. And then shortly after we arrived at the LZ, probably within seconds, the helicopter was touching down, and then the flight crew came in and assumed care and very smooth transition of care for rapid transportation to the University of Cincinnati Medical Center. We knew he needed to get to UC fast.
So a couple follow-up questions for you. You said when you looked in his airway, you actually could see bee stings inside his airway. Is that correct?
Yeah, when we advanced the video laryngoscope into the posterior oropharynx, you could look in the back of his throat and see multiple bee stings.
You're able to secure his airway, and at some point you knew right away that, look, we're going to have to call for a life flight, correct? This was something, if you didn't do, he probably wasn't going to make it.
I believe the fire chief, Chief Peffer, had already early activated the aircraft prior to getting him down out of the tree, I believe, that day. Because I said, where's the helicopter at? And they said they're on the way. And I said, good, we need them.
So as you're doing this, as you're providing this care, getting an airway in the ambulance, were there still bees on him or in the ambulance?
There was. We actually had a medical crew member that was taking care of him at that point during the resuscitation of Austin. We had a medical crew member start getting very lethargic and start having difficulty breathing. He was having a full-fledged anaphylactic reaction during that point. And Danielle was working with the bees. She actually had epi drawn up for me just in case.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, she didn't let me know she had it initially, but she had epi ready for me and probably had an ET tube with my name on it too, ready just in case, because it was. Yeah, bees were all over him. Every time you'd move, you cut clothing, bees would come out. His mother even showed me pictures to where they had suctioned bees out from his lungs at the hospital, where he had inhaled and ingested multiple bees.
And Craig, I know Chief Peffer said that he had never seen anything like this. I can't imagine from an EMT point of view, you've seen anything quite like this as well.
We've seen your standard, person outside in the summertime on the river or at their house working outside and they get stung by a wasp and stung by a bee. Your standard allergic reaction where you treat them with some epi, some Benadryl, some Solumedrol, and some fluids, albuterol, Pepsid, and transport them to the hospital. But nothing like this. Nothing like this.
I can't imagine. Well, out of this experience, clearly this is a unique experience. Have you done any new training or looked at any new gear? Have you shared the story with other departments from the respect of, look, if you ever have anything like this, here's how we handled it. Talk about that side of it a little bit.
Chief Pepper.
We actually had a fire chiefs meeting about 2 weeks after that bee run, and of course I was going through the scenario with all the other fire chiefs, and just when you think you've seen it all, that kind of thing, and we talked about it. But the funny thing about that, the dispatcher for 911 who actually dispatched us that day, she told me, she says, I knew when I took that call that I was dispatching you guys to a really bad run. She said I could hear people screaming in the background and all that. She said I knew I was sending you guys to a bad one that day. But we discussed it with the chiefs meeting, and since then, the only thing that we have really done any different is we after that, I bought two 5-gallon buckets of Dawn dishwashing detergent, and to run through a foam deductor in case we ever have anything like that again, which God forbid we do. But to put the foam or to put the soap suds on the bees. It sticks to their wings or something, and hopefully that'll help us if we ever run into that again. But hopefully that won't happen. So
okay, walk me through this, because
that's what we've done.
I don't understand exactly how that works. So you can get soap suds and spray the soap suds at the bees or on the bees, and it affects their ability to fly?
Yes, yeah.
I was not aware of that. I was not aware of that. So that's
and it's something you never think about. I mean, but we can run it in training. We've used dishwashing liquid like that lots of times, just to simulate foam. And I thought, well, why not? We can do it to squirt, spray on something like that again, and it'll work. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. So let's go back to Austin. He gets on that helicopter and eventually makes it to the hospital. Do you follow up and tell us about that follow-up and how he's doing today?
The flight nurse Ryan reached out to us shortly after they returned to base with an update on the patient. At that point, I think they were in the early thousands of B counts, which obviously I had totally underestimated our medical crew had. I think we thought probably 500 or 600, yeah. The medical crew, Danielle, myself, and our advanced and our basics at that point in time when we had the initial patient contact. And he had followed up. And then the next day, the patient's mother arrived at the ambulance service to thank us, and she said they were well over 10,000. The count was, at that point in time, well over 10,000 and still counting.
What we didn't talk about is there were other people on the ground that ultimately had to be treated and even transported. Is that correct?
Yes, there was Georgetown Life Squad transported, I believe, 2 patients from the scene. We transported 1 by air and approximately 4 by ground ambulance to facilities, and then taking care and assessing the fire department. And I think they also had a couple of refusals, people that were having just mild reactions, were in the area. They were having mild reactions that did not want transported. But yeah, there was multiple. Yeah, this was multiple stuff going on at once.
And ultimately, we had the opportunity to talk to some of the folks who had taken care of Austin at the hospital, and they stopped counting his bee stings at 20,000 bee stings. We also talked to one of the doctors who was familiar with the case and said that there was a marker that's related to allergens. I think it's called the IgE marker or something like that. And Austin had broken a record at the University of Cincinnati Hospital because his this marker was so high in him. And the doctor just said point blank, he shouldn't be alive today. So certainly your actions that day, your ability to get up into that tree, get him out of that tree, the ability to protect his airway, which was rapidly closing up, without a doubt, you saved this young man's life.
It was a team effort that day. The 911 caller that called 911, the 911 dispatchers that dispatched it out, by all hands, the Ripley Fire Department for performing the rescue, going above all odds, putting their own safety on the line and getting up there and getting that gentleman out of that tree as safely and effectively as they did. All of our medical staff on scene, the EMTs, the paramedics, the advanced EMTs, getting the intervention to that patient so quickly, working as a team. They always say it takes a whole community to raise a child. It takes a multidisciplinary team to save someone's life. One person, 2 people alone do not do it. It takes a whole team. To the air teams, to the air care team that responded to transport, and all the multidisciplinary staff at University Hospital, in their emergency room, in their ICUs. Everything came together that day for Mr. Bellamy to give him tomorrow, to defend today, to live tomorrow.
To just add to what Craig said there, the Ripley Fire Department and the Ripley Life Squad are separate entities in the village of Ripley. But with that being said, we have a great working relationship with each other. And when we get dispatched, to anything that's from codes to crashes to bee stings to whatever. I mean, everybody knows their jobs, and we all work together. And just like Craig said, it's a team effort, and everything just really, really went good that day.
Look, that is so key to keeping people in our communities safe, is avoiding getting siloed. And I know it can happen, where entities don't necessarily work that well together for one reason or other. It's so good to hear that you there locally work together and have the shared purpose, obviously, of bringing all of your resources to protect that community down there. Look, we're so proud of you. We're so proud of the entire team. We know it was a team effort. Recently, the entire team was recognized here at the Department of Public Safety through our division of EMS. We give something called the Star of Life Award. And this team, the team that responded to this incident, was recognized and given a Star of Life award. And actually, we brought Austin back in and paired you up with Austin to accept the award and allow him to literally in public, in front of other first responders, acknowledge the fact that you saved his life and thank you for saving his life. And the bottom line is, he would not be here today without your intervention. So we're so incredibly proud of you. What advice do you have for folks? You talked a little bit about bee stings, treating bee stings. I think the major concern with bee stings is folks who are allergic to them and the anaphylactic shock that may come with that. If you can, just take a few minutes, describe what that is and how people should protect themselves, or what people should be on the lookout for if they don't even know they're allergic to bees and they get stung and have an anaphylactic reaction.
That's Craig's.
All right. The biggest thing is prevention. When you're working outside, especially in the summer months, when you're working outside, be alert of your surroundings. Try to avoid getting stung in the first place. Unfortunately, sometimes, as alert as you are, as in this case with Austin's, they didn't know the bees were there. When they started trimming the tree, they obviously found out they were there pretty quickly. They were not happy. So the biggest thing they want to do for a mild reaction is to get away from the bees. Move to a safe area to avoid more stings. If possible, remove any stingers. Obviously, in that case, there was too many pre-hospitally to even work on. They also want to be careful for ground bees as well. You consider applying a cloth with cold water or an ice pack to the area for about 10 to 20 minutes. It helps reduce pain and swelling. If the injury's on an arm or a leg, they can raise it. They take an anti-itch medication and antihistamines such as Benadryl by mouth as prescribed, as recommended by their physician, as recommended. At any time a patient starts to develop difficulty breathing, swelling of the lips, face, eyelids, or throat, dizziness, fainting, or unconsciousness, a weak or rapid pulse, severe hives, nausea, vomiting, or diarrhea, this can be a sign of a severe allergic reaction. And this person needs to call 911 or the local EMS agency immediately, or get to an ER immediately. If you have an EpiPen, and as we start to travel, with it being summertime, going across the state or going to different states, a lot of times people forget their EpiPens. That's something we've seen a lot down here on the river where we're at, being sort of a destination for people to come from Cincinnati, Dayton. It's a different way of life down here. It's a rural area. A lot of people choose to come down here with the Ohio River and spend their summers at the campgrounds or on the river boating. These places are all at risk for heavy bee activity, and people forget their EpiPens. They don't bring their EpiPen with them. So as you're traveling, if you're prescribed an epinephrine pen for anaphylaxis, always take that with you. When you switch out vehicles, or if your physician will allow it, buy a second one to put in your camper, boat, or stuff like that.
Chief Pepper, EMS Chief Hawk, listen, we cannot thank you enough for joining us today, sharing this story with us. We can't thank you for the action you took that day in saving Austin Bellamy's life. And again, we can't thank you enough for what you do each and every day to keep Ohioans safe, keep the people down there in your community safe. Look, you are just a few of the great first responders who are dedicated every day to keeping Ohioans safe and sound.
The Safe and Sound podcast is recorded by the Ohio Department of Public Safety. Links and more information can be found in this episode's show notes. And for more information on all 9 divisions of the Ohio Department of Public Safety, visit publicsafety.ohio.gov.